Former flat earthers, what made you come around? Story 1. I talked to a flat earther about my job working for a company that tracks ship locations, routes, and speeds by satellite. We also had ways of monitoring carbon emissions based on fuel consumption and known weather conditions. None of this would work at all if the Earth was flat. Not a jot of it. I could only explain the most basic concepts, but it was enough for him to understand and realize that I was right, and that he'd been convinced by someone who had no practical experience of the spherical nature of the Earth. I think that's what really did it. My experience was really tangible. This happens, then we measure this, etc., etc. No theory, just practice. A bit like showing a child a rock dropping to the ground in order to explain gravity, rather than giving them the whole theoretical shebang, you know? Edit. Sorry, it's a bit rambling. I'm so damn tired. Story 2. I was debating a flat earther in Mexico, and I asked him about how GPS worked if there were no satellites. He said that they had devices in the ground to route you. I told him the Mexican government is barely able to put decent water pipes in the ground. Would he really think they had the tech to put routing devices in the ground? He chuckled with a 1,000-mile gaze. Story 3. I convinced a flat earther, temporarily, by asking him if it was possible for a sphere to be so large that you could not tell it was a sphere by simply being on the surface of it. It took him a while. I used an analogy of an extremely long line that was so slightly curved, you could not tell so by looking at a small section of it. Eventually, he said yes to the sphere, and I told him that was how big the Earth is. A few days later, he reverted. Most of these people aren't mentally stable. They believe in a lot of conspiracies. Edit, corny edit, but as connoisseur of flat Earth content, my personal favorite is Professor Dave on YouTube. He is an underappreciated dude who just had a science channel on YouTube and got brigaded by flat earthers for an unrelated video. He made like 6 video responses in total just owning these guys, but they eventually gave up. Check it out. Story 4. Look, it's really easy. If the Earth is flat, there would be an edge, and there would be a Disney park at the edge, and we could bungee jump off the side and paraglide into the void, etc., etc. Someone would be making an absolute ton of money off of it, if it existed. Guess what? Nobody's doing that. ADN in this world where absolutely everything is exploited for profit. If no one is making money off of it, it does ... exist. No edge, not flat. Get a clue. Story 5. Not me, but got a flat earther to question his beliefs and hopefully critically analyze them by giving him the proof he asked for, to which he responded, mainstream science and media are lies. I asked why he asked for proof if he could just disregard it as lies either way, then told him that since he required no proof or evidence against to believe something, it made him the easiest person to deceive and that it seemed pretty sheep-like to me. He deleted all of his flat earth comments and hasn't posted about it since. ETA. Holy round earth, Batman. Thank you for the karma and awards and Gould. I promise I'll screenshot next time. ETA 2. He didn't block me. I can still see everything he posted, and the OP thread creator also said the comment disappeared. Shame, shame, shame. Story 6. The inclined seat conformed perfectly to his body, strategically placed in the cockpit so he could reach no buttons with outstretched arms. The straps anchored him firmly in place. They were uncomfortable but necessary. The engine burst to life with a roar that burned out all the other audio. The vibrations tore through his body, and he felt his body sink back into the seat as the G-force began to take hold. The captain was watching the readouts on the LED displays and monitoring their trajectory as the acceleration began to peel his thoughts away. There was no more room in his brain. It had been filled by pure fear. The boosters grew with greater ferocity as they lifted higher into the sky, the sun beaming down on the left side of the shuttle. But faster they went, through max Q and higher into the stratosphere, until the engines grew quieter, the air more silent, and the vibrations became less violent. They were approaching space, the final frontier. An hour later, and with the path of the shuttle a success, he noticed, as his raw emotions withdrew, that his body felt funny. Head hair drifted aimlessly across his eyes as the captain's pen hovered in midair, and he knew the impossible was true. His childhood dream. He was in space, weightless. The captain turned around to him and motioned him to unhook his seatbelts. He did as he was commanded. They both left their chairs and glided over to the tiny glass windows to overlook the magnificence of Earth. "What do you think now?" said the captain. He recoiled in horror. It couldn't be. NASA had replaced the windows with high-definition screens in order to perpetrate their lies that the world was spherical. Those bastards. Story 7. Okay, I get the question is funny and all, but I actually did believe, for a time, that the Earth was flat. I was raised in a very religious family and basically came to the conclusion that the Bible declared the Earth was flat. Because since I believed the earth was created in 7 days, the idea that God set the stars in the sky in one day made much more sense if the stars were simply points of light in a sort of snow globe formation, extrapolated onto a bigger scale. Otherwise, he took one day out of the 7 to make a septillion or so balls of flaming gas, all with their own planets, and set each one into galaxies before breaking for lunch. It just didn't make sense to me that he would spend 5 days on one planet and make the creation of the trillions of other stuff in the universe a little footnote. I was confronted about this belief a couple times, only one of which wasn't laughed off. That single person who engaged started a serious discussion, presenting much more evidence for the globe Earth, and eventually told me to watch Carl Sagan. The Cosmos series was on YouTube, and once I watched it, I had to know more. Finally, a video from the channel Minute Physics convinced me in no uncertain terms that the Earth was round. All it took was one quote, which I still remember leaving chills down my spine. You should have put a serious tag on this question. Story 8. Not a flat earther, but I was a 9/11 truther, I guess you could say, insofar as I thought it was an inside job. I was heavily influenced and believed in multiple conspiracies in the Zeitgeist film as well. There was a never-ending source of dark, shadowy theys and thems controlling everything behind the scenes. I think there were a few factors that helped me escape that. Losing my father. It was such a life-changing event at that age that it made me reconsider everything in my life. Some light training in evaluating information. I learned about how to vet sources, primary, whether something was actually news or just an opinion, editorial, etc. Ironically, this education came before I was duped. After my dad died, suddenly this started to kick in more. Lack of time means to dig myself a deeper hole. I started college shortly after my father passed, and that plus a full-time job took up all my time. I had none to buy further into the newest crazy bull. I had no Facebook/Twitter/IG/etc., no smartphone or texting. My primary use of Reddit, once I discovered it, was for R Naruto, R Bleach, Rage Comics, and Advice Animals. So all in all, I think the time away gave me time to detox. If I'd been on social media as I discovered those things, I can only imagine I very well may have become a Q believer as well. Looking back, I see how gullible I was in that moment, fooled by the onslaught of half-truths and clever logic of the various theories. I know better now, and I should have known better then, but I've been humbled to the fact that everyone is vulnerable to this sort of stuff. To think otherwise is deluding yourself. Story 9. It took about 5 years. It was a lot of willful ignorance on my part. I just refused to question the logic of it. In fact, I spent most of my time coming up with crazy fantasies about a lot of things I didn't understand. But you have to understand that there is just so much we don't know about, that sometimes our priority on what is real and what can be believed can get confused. I was learning so much so fast that I really didn't question something so inane as the world being flat. Of course it was. Why wouldn't it be? The day that changed it forever, though, was when I asked my father, what happens when you get to the edge of the world? He, of course, said the world is round like a ball. Being about 5 years old, I thought that made a lot of sense. Story 10. Did any of you former flat earthers just believe because you wanted to be unique and different from everyone else? I suspect that some people who deny like this are the same people who just wants to be different. They'll say they disliked a movie because the majority likes it. They'll say they don't enjoy a type of food cause most do. Basically, they don't really care how they truly feel about something. They just want to be different and say the opposite of the majority. Maybe not with everything, but they'll choose a few things in life because they want to feel special. Story 11. I once had a conversation with a professional UFC fighter and outspoken flat earther. I tried to explain how Archimedes was able to prove the Earth was round just by using his shadow. I mentioned air travel and how Hawaii and Japan are not 20-plus hours of flying apart. But what I think got through to him the most was seasons. This particular guy was Brazilian. I explained that because the Earth is round, it's possible to be winter in Brazil and summer in the USA and vice versa. He nodded and stared off into the distance silently, and the conversation was over. I don't think I converted him, but it gave him significant pause at the very least. Story 12. Another not me, but might have convinced someone else story. I was on the bus home and a flat earther decided to talk with me about something. IDK what it was, but the conversion quickly turned to the Earth being flat. Humoring him, I asked, if the Earth is flat, how does GPS work? He told me that GPS comes from cell towers. I pressed him and told him that can't be true because I have an app on my phone that shows my location on a PDF when I have no cell signal. I use it when I go hiking in the mountains. He told me that the GPS signal is so much stronger than the cell phone signal that I would still get it up there. Just then we passed through a tunnel and I asked him why. If the signal is stronger, do I lose GPS tracking in a tunnel? He seemed confused and just said, I don't know, I'm just asking questions. As a general rule, all flat earthers are just trolls, and I tell that to their face if it comes up. That out-of-hand dismissal by itself tends to shake them. But I was in a playful mood that day. Story 13. A question I wonder about is, can a flat earther ever stop being one? I think it's a question for psychologists. Being a flat earther isn't about facts. It's a way to gain an identity and reassurance. A flat earther wants to not walk the earth, not understanding anything and not knowing who to trust. It's a way to carve a sense of self out of a sense of incompetence. Instead of walking around as in, now you tell yourself you are one of the few who knows the truth and can't be tricked like the other headless sheep. To stop being a flat earther would be to give up this coping mechanism to deal with your own mediocrity. Even worse, it would be admitting you were wrong, and therefore again reaffirming the thing you were running away from to begin with, the fact that you are just another who doesn't know anything. So I doubt anyone can give up being a flat earther without first overcoming the original psychological need that brought them there in the first place. Just like any other cult. Yes, I'm talking about you Tumpists out there. The more invested you are in the lie, the longer and harder the withdrawal process will be. Story 14. Sunsets, man. Sunsets. I watched all these videos, read a book on it, talk to people about it. I was one of them. Everyone else was crazy for not seeing the truth. Still, I have a lot of questions about how the heck this thing could possibly be a globe, but that's besides the point. But I had an answer for everything. People would ask, why don't we fall off the edge? There is no edge. The Earth's an infinite space. Why do balloons pop when they go high enough? Because there's only so much air and it sinks to the Earth's surface, but eventually you can fly above it and then there's no pressure of the air pushing against the balance, so it pops. How's gravity work? Gravity is made up, I believe, in buoyancy. But one day somebody asked me if the sun is a spotlight in the sky, then how does a sunset work? I was like, and I looked into it. Couldn't find anything that makes sense. Sunsets turned me back. Story 15 was friend to a flat earther a couple of years ago before the time when they came up with the idea that Australia was not real and it's just a hoax by the British Gov. Fast forward to the time when they finally came up with that, needless to say, this flat earther had a sudden change of heart. At first, it didn't process to him that Australia is just a hoax, that it's not real. Then finally came to his senses that the earth is round, and he's been a moron for being a flat earther. Reason for his roundabout? We live in Australia. Story 16. I entertained it for a while. What convinced me the Earth was a sphere was a video I came across of a group of flat earthers doing a laser test over water. They found a stretch of level water around 2 miles long, then used level lasers to measure the distance from the water. The test came back quite accurately, indicating the Earth was a sphere and not flat. They all got super upset and were crying about it. Seems like a doable and effective test, and their reaction, confusion, and heartbreak seemed genuine. Story 17. I actually love the flat Earth argument. Every time I encounter an anti-vaxxer or a plandemic nut, I listen and agree. I then make them listen to my logic on how the Earth is flat. Every time they respond by picking apart the flat Earth logic, I then defend the flat Earth and sincerely compare my proof to their proof against vaccines or COVID. They get so frustrated that I compare their point of view to something as flat Earth. This is especially fun with the anti-vaccine crowd because they think they understand data and scientific research. Story 18, serious answer here. I was really into flat Earth. I never admitted to being 100% sure it was because I wasn't, but I know the general aspect of how it could be possible. I'm not sure if I converted, but I just decided to stop giving it the time and attention I was dedicating it. Like, there are lots of things wrong with the flat Earth theory, but there are also lots of questionable things regarding the Earth being a globe. So for me, it's more of a live and let live kind of thing. Leaving it like that just because I don't feel like writing a whole monument script of my thoughts right now. Story 19. One of my geometry students believed the Earth was flat. I found out because the other students were mocking her for it. I told them to knock it off, and then quietly didn't the rest of the year, trying to demonstrate how the Earth was not, in fact, flat. We did a day on spherical geometry and measuring angles on a sphere. We did projections from 3 to 2 dimensions and looked at different maps of the Earth. They drew the continents on an orange and then peeled it different ways to make it lay flat and compared distortions between the different ways of opening. I got an airline pilot to come talk about using math, and one kid asked why they fly over Greenland to get to London. So he grabbed my gloves and talked about segments of great circles and how beautiful it was to see the Earth curve away through the windscreen. We measured a bunch of shadows on our football field and then Skyped a buddy in Alaska whose class measured shadows on their field and tried to use our data to calculate the radius of the Earth. We were way off. I there in a calculus activity on local linearity, that any curve can be assumed straight on some small scale, and explicitly stated that it was like how Earth looks flat to us but is really a sphere. We even watched videos of tall mass ships disappearing over the horizon during the break in the final exam. At the end of the year, I pulled her aside and asked if she believed the Earth was flat. She said, well, for airplanes and boats and stuff, and like geometry, it's a sphere, but really it's flat. So she knew it was round, but chose to believe it to be flat. Story 20. I was the physics guy. So once, when the neighbor's homeschooled kids started asking about Earth and stuff, my wife invited them over. I had a globe, a ball that I used as the moon, a lamp that I used as the sun, the whole lesson plan. I explain about seasons and eclipses and day-night. I explain about the phases of the moon. After about an hour, the dad asks me, wait, are we on the outside or in the inside of the globe? It must have been a brain fart. The guy's not Ann. But it amazed me that this is the first he ever thought about Earth at all. Story 21. A good way to break conspiracy theorists out of their bubble is just to ask them what, in theory, could prove them wrong. Sample dialogue. Me. So you think the Earth is flat? Tell me, what would it take to prove to you that it's round? Go on, let's act it out. I'll be you, you be me. And you try and convince me the Earth is round with this amazing new piece of evidence. Conspiracy theorist. We put a 24/7 camera feed on the moon that showed the Earth is a rotating globe. Me. Nope. The footage is doctored. It's actually coming from an underground studio in Death Valley. Alex Jones said so. I'm so not convinced. Try again. CT. We set up a laser on a long stretch of ground and then set up a big wooden post every mile for 3 miles. We lined everything up, put a hole in each post at the same height, and then shone the laser through the first one. But the laser didn't go through the holes in the second and third posts. That proves the Earth is curved. Me. Your equipment was faulty. CT. No, it wasn't. Me. Then you must be in on it. How did they get to you? And so on. The one thing all conspiracy theories have in common is that they're all unfalsifiable. And the one thing all conspiracy theorists have in common is that they all think they're smarter than you. If you can put a conspiracy theorist in a position where he has to attack his own theory, and then you defend his theory by making further unfalsifiable claims like you're in on it or whatever, then the fact that they're unable to win the argument, even though there's so much they're smarter than you, and even though they've been given free rein to make up whatever evidence they want, should hopefully make them realize that their precious theory is actually a just-so story. After that, it's easier to get them to accept contradictory evidence. Story 22. I was never a flat earther, but I have always loved conspiracy theories, at least until recently, when I realized they're overwhelmingly based in white supremacy. So I watched hours of flat earth documentaries a few years ago and laughed at most of it. But there was one video clip that a few flat earthers used in their videos. It was some lake in Canada, and they very clearly zoom across the lake, and if there is any curvature, you cannot see it. For years, that video was in the back of my head, like, you know how pretty much everything about flat Earth was eventually debunked? What about that one lake in Canada? And it lived in my brain for a few years, until a couple months ago. Folding Ideas did a YouTube video debunking that exact lake. He lived close enough to drive there and perform the zoom and experiment like 3 different times. And there is clearly curvature. Edit. I still love conspiracies, but I don't believe them. Maybe Bigfoot is real, but who knows? Story 23. I used to run with a gang of flat earthers. We used to hang around a local bar and drink. One day I got into an argument with a rounder. It got heated and I left. My boys heard about the argument and jumped the dude like a week later. Last thing he heard was, take his ass to the edge. When my friend told me about what they did to the dude, I started to think again about the people I hung around with. Story. 99% of flat earthers don't really truly believe it. What they believe is that scientists are liars. The government is preventing us from understanding the natural world, and they enjoy seeing just how scientifically illiterate the average person is. Part of what makes them believe it is that most people have no idea how to explain it because they just accepted it. They watched that Columbus Disney movie or just took it as gospel from a teacher, but probably can't prove the earth is round. That feeds the doubt. But deep down, they know they are wrong, except for the truly delusional ones. TLDR. Flat earthism is less of a belief in a flat earth and more of a performative criticism of how we come to know things. A is one, but still a criticism more than a true belief. Story 25. The flat earth conspiracy bothers me the most because it's so pointless. Like, why would anyone go through the time and effort and expense of convincing everyone the earth was round if it's flat? For what purpose? Who does it benefit? How does it really change the average person's life at all? How does the world look different because the earth is flat, but we all think it's round? Most of it seems to be beef with NASA and the government, but A, NASA didn't discover the earth was round. That knowledge way predates even the founding of America, and it's a conclusion independently reached over and over again across space and time and disciplines. Like, they're not the only space agency out there. or organization company in the world which asserts a round Earth. B. You could argue they propagate it to get federal funding for nefarious purposes, but the DoD, NSA, DHS, FBI, and CIA all get way more, and they point blank state they won't tell us what for. It just seems like the most utterly pointless song and dance imaginable, if that's what you're really after. Furthermore, it belies a type of person who's never been in charge of organizing anything of substance, because if they had, then they'd know that you can't get that much ironclad cooperation amongst a few hundred employees, never mind the whole in-world across many generations. Even the reptilian and chemtrails QAnon nonsense makes more sense than flat Earth, and that doesn't make any sense at all. Story 26. My husband and I have talked about this a lot. He saw some flat Earth stuff and started the conversation with, how do we know the Earth is round? I'm 99% sure he knows the Earth is round, but he debates it in fun so earnestly, I love to bring it up around groups of people because it's hilarious. Anyway, my question has and always will be, why would anyone lie about the Earth being round? How could anyone believe that all the countries of the world have somehow all collaborated together to lie to all citizens that the Earth is round when it's truly flat? What benefits are there to this? Story 27. Leaving my abusive relationship with my ex, I am now a licensed psychotherapist, and this was in college and only lasted for like a week. The problem was that I should have been paranoid about my ex, but instead of placing that paranoia where it needed to be, I focused on anything else. Because to me, the Earth would be flat before my soulmate was just using me to get through nursing school. I stopped believing the Earth was flat, but I did start believing that I was the cause of all the problems in my relationship. Story 28. I grew up with a family that believed in the norm of Earth, being round and oval. Used to babysit their kids, go on holidays together with both of our parents, and be really close with their kids and my parents close with them. Anyhow, situations and life occurs, and 7 years down, we meet them again after a long time. They moved away, and they try and say Earth is flat, honest to anything they tried to convince my parents and their kids. Us, that the Earth is flat. His kids and my parents and theirs had a huge debate. That was the last time we saw them. One thing I would say, it is odd speaking to someone that believes in something so strong, very inspiring yet disturbing. Story 29. My sister dated a flat earther. He was pretty mentally abusive and basically forced her to believe in flat Earth. Like, she bawled her eyes because he dead-ass convinced her that her entire life was a lie and that she was incredibly stupid to believe in round Earth. And she was even stupider for trying to support the round Earth theories. Our entire family made fun of her for believing in flat Earth, which in hindsight definitely was a mistake, as it's still a sore submit for her because she allowed someone to break her down that horribly mentally, and no one really took the time to actually delve into deeper issues besides her believing the IC conspiracy theory. She didn't stop believing in flat Earth until she broke up with his abusive ass and got her sanity and life back. I think it was no one in our family taking her seriously anymore that got her to wake the up, because in every other regard she's extremely intelligent. He was the same way with veganism with her, but ironically, he's not even vegan anymore while she still is. What a loser. Story 30. I just don't get you round earthers. All the evidence is right in front of your eyes. It's all a government conspiracy to keep us believing the Earth is round. Do you know how many people we've lost falling over the edge of the Earth? Why do you think we built the ice walls? Evidence suggests the Titanic was an expedition ship to explore the edge, but they were too late. The ice walls had already been built. The stars aren't real. The moon landing was faked. Space isn't real. Quit being sheep and just believing what you can see, feel, hear, and touch. Ignore your senses. Senses are a lie. They are a government conspiracy as well. Believe me, I learned the hard way. The cake is a lie. Story 31. I looked into it with healthy skepticism, and they did present some interesting arguments. But it seemed that 99% of it was not understanding basic physics, mixed with shoddy measurement techniques. Two things were hard to explain, though. One, that given a sufficiently strong lens, you can see things so far away that they should be below the horizon. Two, that a gyroscope that can move freely doesn't make a full rotation per day, which would indicate that the Earth doesn't move. So I decided to examine it. One big flaw I found was the southern hemisphere. I used the flat map projection with the North Pole in the center and calculated flight routes between major cities. In the North Hemisphere, the math works out, but in the South Hemisphere, it was impossible to match up the distances with the time it took to fly, for example, from Australia to South American or Southern Africa, even accounting for jet streams. So while an interesting idea, especially if it would mean more unexplored land beyond the Antarctic boundary, I concluded that there was more evidence against it than for it. Story 32. Not me, but my GF. That's all she was taught growing up. Her family is hardcore Christians. She went to private Christian schools through 11th grade and spent most of her free time doing gymnastics. When I started dating her, she was 18 and about to go to college. Over time, talking to me, my family, and going to college, she realized how stupid of an idea a flat earth is. I don't blame her because that's all she was taught, but I'm proud she had an open mind. Story 33. Here's an experiment you can do yourself. Tell your coworkers/family/classmates something false but super believable, like you are taking a vacation or applying for a job, but don't want anyone to know for whatever reason. Ask them not to tell anyone. Tell them you felt safe telling them. Now see how many people spill your secret. If people can't be trusted to keep quiet about something mundane, why would NASA, the government, etc. keep silent about the shape of the planet being different from the commonly accepted form? Story 34. I watched a YouTube video that had a debate between actual scientists and some flat earthers, and it was hilarious, painful, and hilariously painful. The video started out well enough, them saying why they believe what they believe in their introductions. But when the actual debating started, the flat earthers kept repeating the same BS and saying, if you look at all the evidence, and then never telling what the evidence was or where they got it. When it was the scientists' turn, they were just desperately trying to have baby's first science class and were completely exasperated when nothing got through. The debate ended in a draw, with the scientists looking miserable and the flat earthers looking all smug like they broke the fictitious walls of science and proved their theory. Story 35. I was a flat earther for several years. I was just used to only believing things that I could see with my own eyes. And thinking too much about things that didn't directly affect me didn't interest me much. I was pretty much just about my family and friends, so the earth being flat just made sense from a logical point of view. What ended up bringing me around was when I got to the first grade, our teacher showed us a globe and then a book about astronauts that went into orbit. She said it was round, and I figured that she didn't have a reason to lie to me, so I accepted it. Story 36. Ooh, good question. My accountant is a 100% legit flat earther, although she doesn't like being called that because that is a name created to discredit us and make us sound crazy. I told her she does that on her own. Anyway, I am for sure looking forward to these answers and can't wait to pass them on to her. She would never see this herself because Reddit is a fraudulent website used by the government to gather information on all of us. Ugh, don't worry, she's only there one day a week. Story 37. Coworkers, a flat earther. Believes a whole host of conspiracy theories that are all tied into the flat earth theory. I've slowly been trying to convince him of the reality of the spherical earth. Tried plenty of things. Why would NASA lie? Why can I fly from the US to Europe by going east or west? How have no NASA scientists come out and said, the earth is flat, we've lied? Each time the answers are generally the same. Either we can't trust anyone, or since he can't personally experience it, he chooses to believe it's false. So since he doesn't have a plane and can't fly in a complete loop around the globe, it simply isn't true, which is like the exact opposite of confirmation bias. Basically, he's the type that says Bigfoot is real specifically because it hasn't been found. Story 38. Talked a lot with flat earthers. Most of them don't care what evidence you show, even if they ask for it, as they suffer from confirmation bias. Also, the vast majority that really do believe are vast conspiracy nuts. Don't get me started on how some of them believe every government in the world unified together secretly to guard the ice wall around the curve of the earth that keeps the water from going over the edge. Story 39. I used to work the same shift in a restaurant with a flat earthier. During downtime, she'd talk all about healing crystals and how the world was actually flat. I was in grad school at the time and was never really around someone with these beliefs, so I'd humor her by listening to what her thought process was like, without judgment. My take on the whole thing was just that she wasn't a person capable of many obvious critical thinking abilities that most people are simply born with. She was a person who didn't understand physics from a basic level, so it was easy to see how she could get intertwined in a flat earth belief. Doing a simple search to critically understand why this would be false was clearly too much work and nonsense. She would probably just throw her hands up in the air with frustration and skepticism if she even tried. She always considered herself a person of deep thought, but in reality, went through her life being mocked by people with more depth than her and could never quite get why. So she thought of herself as special and more knowledgeable than everyone else, and happened to have the secrets to life that others were too blind to see. Then surrounded herself with people of equal thought to further this belief. Story 40. Sea space. Ride an international plane and jump ship before its flawed madness gets me. I was curious of the conspiracy before and see why they believe in it, until the whole demons in Antarctica to bloodletting wishes, sources, outdated medieval maps as proof, and a dead rocket guy on the rabbit hole gets along. Answer. Proper resource and fact-checking learned from school. For X, how does a historian get to document, assess, and know the credible history? Or a detective get clues to solve a problem/riddle? If those flat earth conspiracy been put in my high school essay, it looks like insanity to my teachers or professionals. Just common sense. 11 to 15 years old me was but not deep on conspiracies. My theme is aliens, goved secrets, true crime unsolved, scary stuff, and historical events, but today's extremist theories are a no-no for me. Story 41. There's a cool way to prove that spherical trigonometry simplifies to planar trigonometry. It's pretty straightforward. You start out with the laws for spherical sine and spherical cosine, and then you make the assumption that the arc length is much smaller than the diameter of the sphere, and simplify, and you end up with the planar sine and cosine equations. So one can pretty easily prove mathematically that curvature is imperceptible when the radius of curvature is large and you look at a small portion of that curve. Story 42. Not me, but my brother. He was heavy into it, quoting scripture and talking about the firmament and whatnot. I let him carry on for a few weeks thinking, he just found another rabbit hole on YouTube like the JFK one last month. He'll get over it. After 2 months, I realized he actually believed this entirely. So we were sitting and having a beer one day. I had him explain the whole thing to me from beginning to end. By the end, we were both about 4 beers in, and I stopped him for a moment to ask him a question. Why does it matter if the earth is flat? My brother says, because they are lying to us, man. And the conversation follows. And? That doesn't answer my question. How does it change you waking up and going to work, or anything fundamentally about your life? Him. I guess it's just a belief I have that I shouldn't be lied to. Me. I lie to you all the time, dude. Yeah, I'm only 5 minutes away. Yeah, I don't mind watching your kids. Yeah, I'll bring over some beer and listen to you ramble. But fundamentally, that changes nothing about your life. Him. I never really thought about it like that. Then he called me a douche for lying to him all the time and stopped believing everything he saw on the internet. He's great now, albeit massively high most of the time, but that's just him. Story 43. I think there is an inherent need to belong to a large community. Probably has to do with a feeling of safety and being protected because you are part of a tribe. The problem this can create is that any weakness we have as an individual, physical or psychological weakness, makes individuals sometimes exploitable and will then flock towards a community, and sometimes that community is one that is very wrong in some way. It's hard to turn your back on the community that makes you feel safe and right in this world. It's why cults and extremists and radicals, and yes, even wonky communities like flat earthers, exist and seem to exist without rational explanation. Story 44. The question for me has always been if the universe is flat. I remember very clearly laying in bed with my dad as a kid and asking him what's at the edge of space, and he said he didn't know. Maybe nothing, or maybe it wraps around in a circle. And I suggested maybe it's like Pac-Man. When a rocket ship reaches the edge, it comes back out the other side. He said that would be cool, and maybe it does. It always inspired me to go pursue my dreams and be an astronaut. Today, I have a degree in video game design and interned at NASA. I reached that dream, and I still have no clue what the answer to that question is. I'm not really sure what my point is. Maybe that we all question these things to some degree. And some of us dedicate our lives to it. To question why someone believes in a flat earth is provoking some really striking discussion. Story 45. I wasn't a flat earther per se, but when I first found out about them, I was intrigued and watched a bunch of content about it. This was in the early days of YouTube, and a lot of the info out there was on forums and individuals' blogs and the like. I really enjoyed the content and thought it was a really fun exercise and wondered why I had never heard of it before. Then I realized these people were serious. I legitimately thought it was a game of sorts, a contest to see who could come up with the most absurd explanation that still seemed at least somewhat scientifically plausible, and everyone was just playing along. Story 46. I have so many questions. What shape are the other planets? Are they spherical? If so, how could you fathom that they are spherical and we are not? If not, and they are flat disks, how the hell did they all get flipped just right to where they look like circles in the sky? And how do they stay facing that way relative to the Earth all the time? How do you explain Earth's shadow on the moon? Is there an edge to Earth? Do people live on the underside or do we all live on the top? Don't get me started on asking how days work on a flat Earth because that's a whole other set of questions. Story 47. The Earth is flat. I firmly believe this. The planet we are on is in fact a sphere. However, all sentience has another axis on which it communicates that the 5 senses we agree upon cannot perceive. The Earth is flat not because the planet is not a sphere, but because the life that exists to witness it cannot completely be aware of or witness itself in a universally agreeable context yet. This is the reality of a true flat earther. I don't know if they would be pissed at me for revealing this because it is a conclusion meant to be perceived individually, or elated that another being has finally put it into words for others to ascend from their illusions. Story 48. When talking with a flat earther, I agree with them. The earth is flat from a certain perspective. If you are standing on it and using your eyes, yes, it's flat. However, if you change how you measure it or how you view it, then perspective changes. Then I try to steer the talk to being willing to change one's perspective depending on the change of their view. This seems to make it easier for some to meet me halfway and say, from their viewpoint, it's flat. But if they were able to have another viewpoint, it could change. Baby steps, man. Baby steps. I think the issue is what someone touched on in another comment. It makes the world simpler to them. They are distrustful of anyone else knowing something they don't. They want to be able to know it themselves, so they make it simple enough that they could. Whereas most of us are okay with knowing we don't have to, or even know most of the things around us, but trust experts do and are not lying to us out of some unknown reason. Story 49. I think for me, I wouldn't have even considered myself a full-on flat earther, but it was always fun playing devil's advocate and see where some people will go with particular arguments. However, I also think it comes more from my philosophical approach and whatnot. For example, the realist perspective would basically mean it's easier to assume that the earth is round, because fundamentally, that has nothing to do with my day-to-day existence. In my humble opinion, it's a waste of time unless you're going to build a rocket yourself. Stay safe and stay happy. Story 50. My roommate asked me to prove that the earth was round as a thought experiment/joke. The best argument I have is that if you have experienced time zone differences, for instance on a Zoom call, you have proof that the earth is round. If the earth was flat or slightly curved, the sun would hit every place in the world at a similar angle, i.e. it would be the same time for everyone. The fact that sun sets at different times for different places is solid proof that the earth is round and can easily be confirmed by experiment. Story 51. I will confess it crossed my mind to join the Flat Earth Society as an undergraduate the few times I heard about them. But let me explain, it was not because I believed for a second the Earth to be flat. I was a physics-math double major with astronomy concentration. As a boy, Sagan's Cosmos was one of my favorite shows. My father and I had been active in the local astronomy club since I was about 11. My motivation was that I didn't believe the flat earthers were in earnest. I thought it was a big joke. This was the early 90s and pre-WWW. I had no information about them. I had spent time with a number of astronomers, both professional and amateur, through our astronomy club, star parties, observatory tours, and social gatherings, and knew that for a bunch of nerds, they knew how to have fun, liked to party, and tended to have keen, albeit esoteric senses of humor. So I thought the Flat Earth Society was like a social fraternal organization for astronomers, named after something so utterly ridiculous and anathema to what they knew and believed as a lark. The people I had heard mention it in passing were astronomy or physics professors. They didn't go into detail, and I assumed they were members of or knew of the club. So while it passed my mind that it might be fun to join, I never knew a flat earther or came across any of their literature. It was only a decade or two later when I heard about them again and discovered that they really do believe the earth to be flat. I promise my interest would not have survived first contact with a member or any of their literature.